Music of the Soul Prelude, Chapter 7. Focus on the breath, came a droning, high-pitched voice of their instructor for today, Tina. Like some of the others, she wore a plain cotton robe, this time in a soft green color, with wide sleeves and a brown sandals on her dark feet. Hachiro normally had no problems with her meditation times, and usually such a droning voice was easy to ignore. However, today was different. Today, he sat next to the new outsider who had come in just 2 days ago. Why he had to sit next to her was beyond him, but he really had no choice, nor could he complain or sit elsewhere. It was the instructors that placed them in the room, deciding who sat next to whom, and arguing usually led to trouble, which he avidly tried to avoid. He had his family reputation to uphold, after all, and everyone was expecting great things from him. They had to, since he already had 2 older brothers who achieved high status in their society, and his father was well respected in their community. He had big shoes to fill, and he worked hard to fill them. Breathe in and breathe out, Tina droned slowly. Normally, her voice was soothing, but today it grated on him. Sitting next to the new girl, even if it had been forced on him, was going to tarnish the gleaming record he had worked on so hard to create for himself. Well, to be fair, Ileana hanging around with him did much the same thing. Her family had only been a part of their society for 1 generation, her parents joining in right before she was born, and she was known to be a troublemaker who challenged authority. It was hardly his fault that she latched on to him, and he had no idea why she had chosen him to pester. If any thoughts come up, acknowledge them. Then watch them float by you like a stream and come back to the breath. That was a reminder that he had drifted away from his breath. Normally, he was much better than this at keeping his focus on his breath, but today distractions would not leave him alone. He was calm enough that he could feel that warmth spread over him, tempting him, begging him to drink it in, but he was not focused enough that he could do just that. In a way, that wasn't so bad. They weren't supposed to do that yet, since this class was not yet deemed safe enough to do that yet, and the purpose of this particular meditation was to resist temptation. Still, he wanted to draw in that power, breathe it in with each breath. He just held himself back from doing so. Feel the warmth of your own power, but do not drink it in. This is a practice in restraint. Feel it, become familiar with it, but do not touch it. Tina droned on, and then suddenly gave an exasperated sigh. Before she even spoke, he knew, somehow, what that sigh was for. Next to himself, he could feel an energy, almost a pressure, emanating from the new girl. Krista, you were told not to touch it. Release it now and wait outside. I will speak with you after meditation is over. That caused everyone to open their eyes and stare at the new girl, who was now crimson-cheeked with what he guessed was embarrassment. It could very well have been anger, though. He couldn't tell with her. Either way, she stood from her thin brown cushion and hurried out of the room, her bare feet making a soft slapping sound on the wood floor. What are you all looking at? Tina said sternly. You all know better. Back to your meditations. Hachiro watched as everyone closed their eyes once more, following suit soon after. He knew without watching that their bodies would slowly begin to relax, starting with their faces. Tina began to drone on again about focusing on the breath, and while he did manage to do just that for a moment, his mind kept wandering back to the new girl. He had never before felt anything like that from anyone. He had felt it from others who were fully trained, but to a lesser degree. This was only his 3rd week of training and her 2nd day. There was no possible way an outsider would be so powerful that he could feel her grasping her power so soon, or so powerfully. Deep down, though, he was afraid. A part of him knew that he should not have been able to feel her that powerfully. Another part of him knew that she should not be that powerful, that able to grasp her ability so soon. Something wasn't right about her. Something wasn't right about the whole situation surrounding her. Today, Tina said, pulling Hachiro out of his reverie, we will discuss your power. All of you know by now that you have a special soul, a powerful soul, a soul that can do things many people could never dream of. This does indeed make you special. It also means you have far more responsibility. You have the responsibility for caring for your community, and indeed the world around you, with your power. For as you care for the planet, so shall it care for you. You have a responsibility to uphold the law, not exempt yourself from it because you're different. You have a responsibility to be fair, even when others are unfair to you, to be just when others treat you unjustly. You will all spend the next 15 minutes meditating on your responsibility before we go any further. This is of utmost importance. Tina always had been one to stress responsibility, and Hachiro agreed with her. What they could do could easily turn to disaster. But as much as he tried to meditate on his own personal responsibility, his mind kept wandering back to the power that he felt from that girl. After a time, he decided that today was not a good day for meditations. At least, not right now. Thus, he opened his eyes. Something he knew would get him into trouble if he didn't have an explanation, and he had already thought of one, and raised his hand. Hachiro, you were supposed to be meditating. What is it? Tina snapped at him. She wasn't normally one to snap at people, but something had her on edge. I'm not feeling well. I think something from breakfast disagreed with me. May I visit the infirmary? He asked, trying to look as nauseated as he could manage. You may, but be quick. This is a very important meditation, Tina said after a moment of hesitation. He could tell she knew it was a farce, and silently thanked her for going along with his ruse, though why she should was beyond him. Thank you, he said with a short, seated bow. Showing respect was just as important as being responsible in some ways. Hachiro stood from his own thin brown cushion, hardly enough left of it to be called a cushion. The damned thing was nearly as hard as a rock, and left the room, closing the door behind him. Outside the room, sitting on the bland, white-painted hallway with dark wooden floors, was the new girl, her arms around her knees as though trying to be as small as possible. With her girth, that was practically impossible, but it appeared that she tried. He stood in front of her with his arms crossed over his chest, staring at her for a moment. This was partly for intimidation. He was not tall, and he had to learn early how to be intimidating in spite of his height, and partly so he could choose his words. He would not break any rules, not outright, but it would surprise others how easily he could skirt them if they could actually pin it on him. You're causing a lot of trouble, you know, he told her, trying to sound stern. He must have succeeded, because she seemed to draw in on herself more, a feat he thought impossible with her size. I know, she whispered. I'm not trying to, I promise. I don't know what I'm doing. That's why you're here, to learn. Though why they would let an outsider learn instead of just letting you die out of your own stupidity is beyond me. You should listen to the teachers and do as you're told, he snapped at her. I'm trying. It's so hard not to touch that power, that energy. Yeah, it is, Hachiro told her after a moment of thought. He could understand that strain. He felt it all the time, particularly while meditating. So you must try harder. Tell me, how is it an outsider like you is able to touch that power so soon and so powerfully? Where have you trained before here? I haven't. That's why I don't know what I'm doing, she wailed. That's impossible. No one gets that far in anything less than a month of training, and you've only been here 3 days, Hachiro said with a suspicious glare. I don't get it either, okay? She said petulantly, and plainly afraid of her own ability. As well she should be. Something in her voice, perhaps her frightened attempt at retaliation that was so blatantly fearful rather than retaliatory, or perhaps the way her voice quivered as though she were about to cry, softened his shoulders. He may be a jerk sometimes. He knew it, and he owned it. In order to fill such big shoes, he sometimes had to be an ass. But he still didn't like to see women cry. Still, he wasn't ready to trust her, let alone befriend her, though perhaps she did need a friend. Just keep trying. You'll get it eventually, he told her finally. I probably shouldn't be the one to tell you this, but everyone is going to be harder on you than they would anyone else because you're an outsider. They don't want you here, so they are going to do their best to push you away. Tina at least is fair-minded, so the worst you can expect from her is a lecture and extra meditation on your first infraction. But don't let yourself slip up again. I doubt she will be as merciful the second time around, and your other teachers won't even give you that much. If you tell anyone I've warned you this much, I will deny it, and they will believe me because I have a reputation of not breaking rules, and you are the outsider. You will always be the outsider. It is best for you that you remember that. Hachiro gave no time for her to respond with anything. He continued down the hall, leaving her in stunned silence. Knowing Tina, she would check with the infirmary to see if he had actually gone as he had requested, so he had to hurry to get some ginger tea in time to return to class and make it look like that was all he had done. Students had to keep a modicum of decorum, which meant no running indoors, but he wasn't against a quick trot where no one could see him.